Hello and welcome to Vendor Trash. Is the title a reference to my opinions, my drawing skills, or both? That's for you to decide. About a week ago, Lore, or Devilore, put out a video about the Crest upgrade system and the problems he had with it. For those unaware, Lore used to work as a community manager for Blizzard, and during Legion, he and Ian Hazakostas would regularly put out Q&A videos for the community. I'm kind of sad we don't get those anymore, but I think Blizzard realized that the more they say publicly, the more ammunition the community has to use against them. Anyway, Lore no longer works for Blizzard, but he did leave on good terms, and he still puts out WoW content regularly and streams and all that sort of thing. Anyway, seeing that video he put out inspired me to release one of my own in regards to the upgrade system. To be clear, this video is not meant as a rebuttal. In fact, I did most of the outlining before I even watched his video, and I agree with a good number of the points he made. Lore is a pretty sensible guy. I just thought it was an interesting topic, so I'm kind of using it as a springboard for my own video. One of his points that really resonated with me is that something can be the appropriate level of complex, but still be too complex for certain players to enjoy. I really get this with crafting games, for example. For their target audience, I'm sure most of them are right on point, but personally, they drive me crazy. I'm sure I could learn all the recipes and commit them to memory or make the spreadsheets or whatever, but I just find that whole thing super boring, and I only play them to be playing with my friends. But yeah, pivoting to the actual topic of this video, we have the Crest system. It basically works like this. Any current content you do will award you one of 4 different tiers of crest. In the current season, that means weathered crests as the weakest tier, then carved crests, then runed, and finally gilded. You can then use 15 of these crests to upgrade an appropriate piece of gear by about 3 item levels. There are also 6 different tracks of gear, the lowest item level being Explorer, then Adventurer, then Veteran, then Champion, then Hero, and finally Myth. The higher the track of the gear, and thus the higher the item level, the higher quality of crests you need to upgrade them. The crests don't actually map one-to-one with the tracks, so it's easier to think of them as eye level cutoffs. For example, right now you can use runed crests to upgrade your gear up to item level 619, which for champion gear sets it at 8 out of 8 upgrades, and for hero gear sets you at 4 out of 6. In addition to the crests, there are also Valor Stones that you need to perform upgrades. These are given to you for doing basically any current content and cap out at 2,000. Now, if this sounds overly complicated to you, that's quite understandable. On paper, it is a lot to take in. But once you actually start interacting with the system, it doesn't take that long to understand it, I feel. And part of that is because of one of the best parts of the system, which is that you don't really need to understand it to use it. If you just want to completely shut your brain off for it, all you need to do is run over to the upgrade NPC, who I think has consistently been Kuzalth the Drakthir, and plop your items in there and upgrade anything that you're able to. Over time, you'll just naturally start to learn what you need for any given upgrade. But even if that doesn't happen, you're not really going to be out that much. Technically, you can optimize it a bit by not upgrading gear that you know you're going to get an upgrade for, and then you can sort of bypass those upgrade levels. But even if you don't do that, you're not going to be out that much. And this is largely just because the game remembers your progress in the upgrade system. If you've previously upgraded a helm to item level 613, then when you upgrade another helm to that item level in the future, it'll cost no crests and a pretty significantly reduced Valor Stone cost. So even if you kind of screw up how you do it at the start, the ship will right itself over time. And in this way, it's actually extremely friendly to players who aren't familiar with the system yet. In practice, it usually winds up that at the start of the season, you're kind of choked for Valor Stones, or in Dragonflight's case, Flight Stones. But it doesn't take too long before crests become the bottleneck. This is due in large part due to the weekly cap on how many crests you can earn. I believe the cap is 90 of each crest per week, or in other words, 6 upgrades of that crest level per week. This is a growing cap over the season, so you aren't penalized if you don't max out on crests in any given week, and is overall a good component to the system in my opinion. I'm going to do a whole video about this in the future, but it is very important that Blizzard implements these caps. Not only does it protect the most tryhard of players from just binging everything from the get-go and probably complaining about it, but it also helps ensure that the majority of players get a sense of gradual progression throughout the season. I think Blizzard has done a very good job of cultivating the game to give you that very gradual sense of progression. Of course, there are always just going to be random loot drops from dungeons and raids, but this gradual upgrade progression as well as the weekly vault, which gives you one elevated piece of gear every week, does a great job of making you consistently feel like you're getting stronger, which of course also means that players gradually become more capable of overcoming their target content. This way, Blizzard doesn't have to lean too heavily on targeted content nerfs to ensure a appropriate percentage of the players are clearing that content. Although as I'm recording this, I am aware that Narubar Palace now has a bi-weekly system that basically nerfs everything by 3%. But the point is for Blizzard to not have to do that for all content every tier. And from a player perspective, it just feels good. I love when we finish a raid night and I just fly over to Kudos and figure out what items I can and want to upgrade. It makes most raid nights feel rewarding even if you didn't kill any new bosses or didn't get any loot. And though it doesn't happen super frequently because there's only 4 of them per season, you can also get the achievements when you outgrow a certain crest. So basically once you have gear in every slot that cannot be upgraded any further with a certain crest, you get an achievement that tells you as such. This also unlocks the ability for you to trade in 90 of that crest for 15 of the next highest, so a 1-to-6 conversion rate. This allows you to actually reach a little bit beyond your natural upgrade range. And just so nothing feels too wasteful, if you do cap out on a certain crest for a week and earn more of that crest, you'll just be awarded the same amount of the next lowest crest level. Since I very consistently cap out on runed crests, that means I start accumulating carved crests, which obviously aren't super useful to me, but you never know. Now, for a player like me who does heroic raiding, and usually reaches for plus 10s as his very top end for the season, I wind up with mostly hero track gear, maybe a small spattering of myth track, and I'm usually pretty starved for gilded crests. Blizzard actually tweaked things just a day or two before I recorded this episode, so that gilded crests begin dropping at plus 8 instead of plus 9. This is definitely helpful and I am thankful for it, but I don't think it was strictly necessary, despite the community really strongly demanding it. Simply put, I'm not a myth track player, so I don't really feel entitled to myth track gear or the crests that are primarily used on that gear. I was fine with the trickle of gilded crests we were getting from heroic Silicon Court, and once we actually start killing her, heroic Ansarek. But I'm not against the change, and most people seem to love it, so good move, Blizz. I think it's also important to acknowledge how this all interacts with the new crafting system that was implemented in Dragonflight. Now, there is a whole lot you can say about this new crafting system, but I think my view of it boils down to it being really fun if you're the crafter, and it being kinda tedious if you're the consumer. But as far as gearing is concerned, you're allowed to wear 2 pieces of crafted gear. And pretty much everyone will want to because crafted gear can include embellishments. You can have 2 embellishments active, and they're basically a quirky little enchant. I believe crafted gear can be made at 4 different item levels based on the runes you use to make them. Meaning if you want your crafted gear to be at item level 619, you're going to be using runed crests. Now, crafted gear can also be made in 5 different qualities, and I think this is where it starts to become a bit of a headache for the consumer, because the quality that the gear will be made at depends on the quality of the reagents supplied and the skill of the crafter who makes it. But this information obviously isn't really available to the consumer when they're using the crafting order interface. And frankly speaking, everybody wants it to be made at pentagold quality because why wouldn't you? Now, for personal orders and guild orders, you can set a minimum quality level that you're willing to accept, but you can't do this for public orders. And it is pretty stupid that that's the case. I'm pretty sure it's a holdover from Dragonflight and its Ingenuity crafting stat, which gave you a chance at proccing a higher quality craft. But the War Within basically replaced this with Concentration, which you can choose to spend to guarantee that your item will be crafted at a higher quality. If you spend Concentration, it will then naturally start to regenerate up to a cap of 1000. Ingenuity still exists, but it's basically just a chance to refund any concentration that you spend. All in all, it means that you no longer have to rely on good luck to guarantee a craft quality upgrade, which means there's no real reason you shouldn't be able to demand a crafting quality from public orders. And as someone who made one of his own pieces of gear, I can say that just a month in, it is not at all difficult to guarantee a pentagold. So yeah, the crafting system as a whole can be a little daunting when you first look at it, but I feel it's actually a great addition to the game once you do wrap your head around it. It's very nice if you're just having extremely bad luck with certain slots, or if there are no drops in the current season that give good stats for your spec, to be be able to plug those holes with crafted gear, and that in fact you want to have 2 pieces of crafted gear, which is also just great for any of the professions that do craft gear. I feel for a lot of expansions they just sort of became irrelevant very early on. Shadowlands did have you crafting legendary gear, but you had to make a bunch at low item level to learn how to make the higher item level ones, and that just seemed super wasteful. It's much better with the current system. So yeah, I guess the thesis of this video is that I love crests and the new upgrade system, and I love the new crafting system and how it all works together. I think it's very forgiving for players who don't fully understand it, and very rewarding for players as a whole. The only thing I would change about it are little things, like maybe color coding the different crests to be more intuitive, or maybe have a little less overlap between different gear tracks. But overall, I think the system is a pretty great innovation on Blizzard's end. Now then, the most fitting character for the drawing this week would have been Kudos, but that would be an extremely boring character to draw, so I decided to go with a different Drakthir, the de facto leader of the Drakthir, Emberthal. What can I say about her, other than that I don't really care about her that much. I don't hate her or anything, I just didn't find her story or her inner struggles to be all that compelling. I will commend the writers for tying it into a lot of Dragonflight's overall themes. She has a good relationship with Abyssian as they sort of bonded over their shame of their heritage, and overcoming that shame to create a brighter future for their respective peoples. But it just didn't hit that well for me. It felt almost a little melodramatic. And I think this is in no small part just to the fact that she's a Drakthir. They're straight up not one of my favorite races in the game, and the fact that they all have like lizard snouts makes it a lot more difficult for emotion to be conveyed. So yeah, I probably haven't given her an entirely fair shake. Maybe with more time I'll look back more fondly on her character. And for the setting, I just chose to put her in Valdrakken. It is where Drakthir stand on the loading screen, so it made sense to me. I also thought about putting her in the Forbidden Reach, but I'm probably going to use that in another video. I will say that Valdrakken is a pretty well designed capital. I certainly enjoyed it more than Oribos, for example. But I probably wouldn't put it as one of my favorites either. Not sure exactly why, maybe it feels a bit too open, which makes sense for a city of dragons, but at the same time it made it just feel less cozy. So yeah, a character I have pretty neutral feelings on, in a city I have pretty neutral feelings on. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next week. Bye-bye!